Celery is something that should be continually watered. I kept it up for most of the summer. Of course, I didn't keep it up for the last month and a half. I should have dealt with this celery a long time ago. Typically what I do is I'll end up this time of the year throwing it in the compost, whatever's left. I've used very little of it this year. Instead of throwing it out, this is the first year I've had a dehydrator, so I thought, why not try and salvage a crop? So in this video I'm going to show you how you can salvage a crop that's a crop that you would otherwise possibly throw out, like I've thrown out year after year after year of not watering them. A lot of this stuff I will throw out. So you can see when you don't water your celery, it invariably turns hollow. And the hollow of celery, of course, isn't really what you want to keep. I've decided to dehydrate this and try and salvage my crop. I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some celery powder, celery salt. And the fact that it's hollow really shouldn't matter by the time I'm done with it. So I'm going to do some here and we'll see what we get out of this crop instead of throwing it all away in the compost like I do. Okay, so I got my wife to help me out with this, thank goodness. Anyway, what I have here is about 45% of my ruined celery. This crop was of course a disaster, but I'm salvaging it. After it's dehydrated, I'm going to grind it in my coffee grinder or something into celery powder.
Am I in there?
Quiet. Quiet, you.
Am I in there?
No, you're not in there. Well, maybe one elbow or a knee. The object is to get that pile of greenery into there. And I'm going to use this food processor. This food processor I bought on Kijiji for 60 bucks. It comes with everything, including a meat grinder. My parents have the exact same one. I was looking for one and I saw this thing and I thought, why not buy that? Then our parts are interchangeable, and you know what? It's been very useful. I've used stuff from my parents' one and I have stuff that they could use in theirs. So it's ancient, but it really does work. What I've got here is a mixed bag of leaves and stalks. The blade I've never used, and this is what I'm going to use. I figure this thing should slice it about 3/8 of an inch or whatever, and it should also chop it. So I should be able to reduce this big pile here into something that'll fit in my dehydrator. So let's see if it works. Let's set it on chop. What do you know? Too slow. We're all about efficiency here at the garden. Okay, this blade sucked. Celery is very stringy and it was plugging this thing up. Slicing unit, just a straight slicer. This seemed to work better. It didn't plug up as much. That should dehydrate pretty good. So here's all that giant bunch of celery there into the bowl. We'll see if we can shove that in the dehydrator. I think it'll all fit. You can see what it looks like after I've spread it around the trays. It's way thicker than typically what you'd use when you're dehydrating anything. They say celery is 90% water. My particular crop I think was probably less than half of that because it's pretty dry. The moisture we see here is mostly from washing it, obviously. We'll fire it up and see what it looks like in a little while. Kind of looks like that stuff they put in left-handed cigarettes, doesn't it? For a ruined crop of celery, that sure made my house smell nice last night. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and put some of this stuff in a coffee grinder or something like that, and we're going to turn it into powder and see what we got. I dehydrated this on 52 degrees Celsius. Other sites say to dehydrate it at a lower temperature. One site said 105 to 110 degrees. Another site said 105 to 118 degrees Fahrenheit would keep the enzymes intact, so it would still be a living food. Trouble is, I don't want it in my dehydrator all weekend. This is only about 40% of my crop, and I got limited time to do this, so I guess if you wanted to keep probiotic enzymes, you might do it at a lower temperature. I just went with 52 degrees Celsius or 125. There's 35 milligrams of sodium per stalk of celery. Celery is supposed to have lots of something called nitrates. Apparently it's good for high blood pressure and also prevents blood clotting. So I'm curious to see what this is going to taste like after it's been ground up. I'm hoping it might be a nice salt substitute. At the very least, if I do a coarse chopping of this stuff, it might be something that's looks like something that might be nice just to chop it up a little bit and throw it on top of soup. So I'm going to make about 2 shakers full of this, and then the rest of it I'm going to put in jars. The book that the dehydrator came with was talking about something else. It wasn't celery. It said you're better off to leave it in the coarse form and grind it into a powder as you need it. It'll keep the flavor better, and that makes sense to me. They say the powder is good for putting like on salads. It's good for soup, of course. They say you can use it in salsa. And apparently, I've heard this a number of times on different sites. It's this powder in the shakers is really, really good on tomatoes, so I'm looking forward to trying that. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with all of this. Maybe I'll put some of it in veggies and sell it at the high school. So I'm going to get obviously twice as much as I need. But like any gardener, I've got my ways of foisting it on others. So I dehydrated this. It took me like 12 hours. One guy, like I said, he did his between 105 and 110 degrees. He spent like 38 hours dehydrating his. I don't have that kind of time. So 12 hours is enough to get it bone dry. So what we're looking at is celery powder. I guess if you wanted to make it celery salt, you could take and add a certain portion of white salt to it. So anyway, that's it. That's how you can salvage a crop of celery that would otherwise be compost. Low salt substitute. Okay, so here's the rest of my celery. It's actually a little bit less than what I thought. There's only 4 bunches here. We'll see what we get. So here's batch number 2, the 4 bunches. Might have to go rescue the rest of my carrots and parsnips today. Might have to blanch and freeze some Swiss chard today. Maybe harvest the rest of my beets. So I harvested basically the whole thing today. Carrots, parsnips. This is some Swiss chard. I'm going to see how much Swiss chard I can get done here. I'm kind of running out of ambition. I picked the frozen leaves. It's only like -3 out there. It's probably going to be at least -10 or 12 in the morning. So I figured I'd better do some harvesting here because the leaves might be beyond salvaging. They're frozen, of course, right now. But they do, when they warm up, the cells aren't destroyed on most of them. The odd leaf I will throw out because it has become mushy. You can see it looks like it's pretty good. I'm just going to blanch and freeze these instead of losing the whole crop. I'll tell you one thing that's novel about this. Taking frozen leaves like this. Usually when I wash vegetables, I start out with cold water and then it will warm up. I'm starting off with cold water and the water is getting colder by adding these frozen vegetables. Very, very cold. It's about -3 right now. This doesn't look like much. Swiss chard is frozen. But after washing some of it, the cell structure is still intact on these leaves, but it's going to be really cold in the morning, probably -10 or 15. At least -10 anyway. And I think with that, these leaves won't be salvageable, so here I am out in the snow harvesting. So it's cooled off now to about -6. I just harvested all my bunching onions. A few minutes ago they were snapping off just like glass. And you know, in a matter of a couple of hours and a couple of degrees, the second batch of Swiss chard, I am ending up throwing away about 75% of the leaves. I guess there's a fine line in how much temperature, just how much cold they'll take, or maybe it was the duration of cold, but I definitely had to throw a lot away for the second half of my Swiss chard. Anyway, the only thing left in my garden now is Brussels sprouts, and we'll see what happens with them. 24 hours later, you can see the snow never really melted. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, everybody.